Yay, Curtis Lake Church. We are so excited to be here. You know, it has been a while. We were trying to figure out how long it's been, and we can't remember, but we are so glad that you are here. You know, can we say this?
Yeah,
You're our favorite church.
yeah, yeah, you are.
As a matter of fact, you do go week so well that we were talking how so many other churches from Texas, where our home base is, could learn from you. You guys doing an amazing job. I just want to give you a hand. John, we want to give them a hand
Yes.
because they're doing such a great job in having a heart for mission.
Well,
So
tell
thank
tell
you.
them how. Some people may not know.
Well, you're actually taking an entire week to celebrate the partners and to celebrate the work that God is doing through you. And
Yeah.
so this is amazing. Very, very few churches actually do this. So they're doing an amazing job. And you're actually inviting people from all over the world to come and be with you. And that's another exciting thing. So anyways, I want to thank Pastor Josh for having us again here. I want to thank Terry. You know, she's been so Terry, I love you.
Yeah.
She has done such an amazing job, not just with organizing this, but also with keeping in touch, I'm sure with other missionaries, but with us as well. So that, you know, that helps us, it makes us feel like we're not alone, you know, like people get in touch with us and let us know, and she's such an encouragement. I also want to thank Scott. Scott, are you here? Scott Mayer? Next
Oh,
service.
next service, okay.
Well, I want to thank him because he's been he's been the lead on the prayer team, and he's been emailing us and texting us and encouraging us. And he always says at the end of his messages, send me your 3 prayer points for this week, because my team is going to pray with you and for you. And do you know how much that means to us? That means a lot to us over on the mission field. So thank you so much for that. You guys are amazing. And maybe some of the people in the audience, John, do not know who we are.
Yeah.
Some of you have followed us on social media, and we follow you back, and you send us messages to them. We want to thank you. But some of you don't know us. Maybe this is the first time you see us. So, John, take it away. Let them know who we are and introduce our family.
Let me tell you a few things about us, but before I do that, I just want to tell you what we're going to talk about this morning. You might notice a little accent here, so just don't mind that. I'm from all the way East Texas. Thank you for laughing. I
Not
appreciate
really.
that. That was meant to be a joke, so I appreciate it. So what we're going to do is we're going to share some stories with you, because that's what I feel like missionaries coming back to you. We would love for you to hear what you are doing around the world. And specifically, we're from Moldova, so what you're doing in Moldova. So we're going to share stories. Then I'm going to share with you one of the greatest newsletters from the Bible. So I'm going to read through some verses in the Bible, and I'm going to show you point out a few things as a newsletter and an encouragement for missions. So go ahead, Adriana.
Yeah, so
I got to
introducing
talk about our family. Yeah.
You have to. You have to, definitely.
So when we moved to Moldova, it was a while back, about almost 18 years ago. So I'm going to start from your left. That's our son, Caleb. He's 21 now. He was about 4 years old when we moved to Moldova. So he grew up there. Beatrice is next. She's 18, graduating from high school right now. She was 6 months when we moved. And then Adriana and I. And then next to me is Oksana. Oksana is our adopted daughter. We adopted her when she was about 15. Now she's married, and she gave us a wonderful granddaughter, Leah.
And by the way, we adopted Oksana from an orphanage from Moldova. So she's from Moldova, but now she lives in Texas with her husband and our granddaughter. So we are grandparents. Pretty young,
So
okay?
that's our family. And I also would like to share with you where Moldova. How many of you know where Moldova is? I know I don't see your faces, but okay, the picture is up, so the cat is out of the bag. You know where it's at. A lot of people have not heard of Moldova, so I got to explain what it is, because when I say Moldova, people start thinking about the Princess Diary or Disney movie or something like that. They really don't believe it's a real country because it is a small country. Came out of Soviet Union when it split apart. It's tiny. I think it's smaller than Maine. So as a country, it's a small country. But it's right between Ukraine and Romania. And being right next to Ukraine, about a little over a year ago, in February 24 of 2022, we had a lot of refugees when the war started in Ukraine. We're very close to the war zone, but that's a little bit about Ukraine. I'm going to want Adriana to share with you a little bit about the refugee relief, because once the war started, a lot of churches asked us how can they help, because we had a lot of refugees coming through Moldova.
That's right, John. And you know, we were so fortunate to be there and be a help to those, and to be actually a channel for those of you here in the United States who wanted to help the refugees coming out of Ukraine. And so as the crisis started, we first began to help out with making hot meals for the refugees. So the country of Moldova is about 2.5 million, close to 3 million people. And within just a few months, maybe 3 to 4 months, Moldova has been inflated by about 1 million refugees from Ukraine. So you can imagine the infrastructure and everything in the country was just blown apart. So we started with hot meals for these refugees. We would go to refugee centers. But then as we were doing that, we noticed another need. We noticed that there were so many children that were there, and they were running around, and they would restless, and they would, cry and all of that. And so we thought, well, what can we do then for the children? So the next thing that we did, as we continued to do the hot meals, we also added on some care packs for the children, and they were so happy and excited every time we would give them one of these care packs.
We realized how many parents, when they are on the run, would pack toys for kids. When you're running for your life, when your house is blown apart and you barely made it, when you know that your house, your village, your city is being invaded, and you have to run, and you can take only what you carry. I think very few people think about toys for kids. And most of the refugees that came to Moldova were young women with kids.
Right, because the men were not allowed to leave. They had to be taken into the fight. So that's the second thing that we noticed. So we started doing these care packs. Then after that, what we've noticed is a lot of the refugees that were fleeing right from the front lines of the war, they were fleeing towards the west, so towards Moldova, but they didn't quite want to leave their country. So they were fleeing, and they would stop close to the border of Moldova, and then in that area, some of the local churches began to open their churches and their sanctuaries and their facilities for these refugees. But then, they're having all these people, what are they going to do? How are they going to meet their needs? So then what we started doing is we started just loading up trucks of relief, things that were needed. And again, they gave us the list of things that were needed. And so John, I'll have to tell you this story, because one of the pictures you'll see there is the cars there. It's at the border as he's crossing the border from Moldova into Ukraine. So I told John, I said, here, we're making a deal. You can go ahead and take these truckloads with relief at the border, and then we could have the church from Ukraine come at the border and pick it up. And I said, I don't want you to go into the war zone.
So we had some partners in Ukraine that we got in touch with, and we told we want to help, and they gave us a list of what we can take. And I would just pull a cargo van to this big grocery store and load it up with whatever they asked, and drive to the border, and they would ask me to bring diesel for their trucks that they would come to pick up their load, because diesel in Ukraine, when the war started, almost became currency. They had no diesel, no gasoline. So we were paying for everything, but even for transportation. And then we'd have to reload our load into their trucks, and then they would take it.
So a couple days prior to John taking this load, there was a bomb that fell in Odessa, which is where one of our partners in Ukraine was, one of the churches that we were sending these loads to. And so John goes to the border and said, okay, John, you go, you pay for the gasoline for the road, but you hand off this load at the border and you come right back. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. Okay. I said, promise me. He didn't, yeah, that's fine. He didn't say the word promise. So, anyways, he is at the border, and I said, I want you to text me when you're there, when you're coming back. We're having to keep in touch because this is like war. It all started. It's chaos. Oh my goodness. So we want to keep in touch. So he's at the border, and then he calls me and he says, "Hey, Adriana, hey, we got at the border. I just want you to know everything's good, everything's fine. We'll see you in a little bit." Okay, fine. Close the phone, and then about a few seconds right after that conversation, I receive a text message with a picture, and the picture was the map of like from the border to Odessa, like the Google map that shows you the directions, right? The directions that you take from the border into Odessa, which meant I am going all the way to Odessa. And so I was kind of freaking out. I was like, there was a bombing in Odessa just 2 days ago. And so I was like, writing to our partners and writing to my family, like, please pray for John. He's going into Ukraine with this load, and there was a bombing there just 2 days ago. Anything could happen. Just, pray. And so we're so grateful that in those moments, you, Curtis Lake Church, would always write to us. Terry always just, she'd text and be like, "Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay? Please let me know if you guys need anything, please." Almost daily, almost the care that you had for us in those moments. And now we're okay and we're fine, but in those moments, when you have war at your doorstep, it's a totally different environment and a totally different feeling. And just to know that people across the world cared enough to write a message and to make that they cared enough to know how we were doing and that we were doing okay.
This is why we said you're our favorite church.
Yes, definitely. And so that's what that happened. So we continue, and John continued to cross over the border after this load. He got comfortable with that. But then what we also did in our efforts to meet the needs of these Ukrainians is we started going to the border and taking families from the border into the capital city, and then from there, some of them would want to go to a refugee center, but some of them would want to get on the buses that would go to Romania or other countries in Europe. And so we started taking these loads also.
I just want to add a little bit in here, so for you guys to understand a little bit better why I had to go into Ukraine, is because we kept on taking loads. At least twice a week, I would go with loads of water, paper products, different things that they'd request, medicine. And it started being so hard for them because they had to use their transportation to go distribute all that. And then they kept begging, "John, can you please help us bring it all the way?" But then going through the border, I realized that there's so many people waiting in lines to cross into Moldova. Now, we're talking about 1 million of people in a couple of months coming through Moldova. Some of them remained in Moldova, but a lot of them wanted to actually just come through, and they wanted to go to Europe. So what that created, because Moldova was not ready, and it was a war, so they were trying to protect Moldovan borders, but at the same time, they were trying to accommodate the people that are coming through, so they were not ready with workers. So there were such big lines. There were people that were waiting in lines at the border for almost days. There are people that are waiting for 8 hours was the shortest wait on the other side to come into Moldova. And then once they came into Moldova, they would stay there. There were a temporary camp there, and they're trying to figure out where they're going because there's no transportation. So I'm sorry, I had to explain.
That's good. Thank you, John. And then so that we noticed that need, and so what we said, well, let's fill up some vans and buses so we can take families from the border into the capital city, and then from there, whatever they wanted to go, whether to remain into a refugee center in the city or whether they wanted to go into Europe. And so that's how we found one of these families that you're going to see on the screen, a family that had a little girl. She was 9 months, and the brother was, I think, 7 or 8. Yeah. And so it was the mom with the grandmother, that left Ukraine, that flee. And so it took them 3 days by foot to come from their home and cross the border and into Moldova. It was, by the time they were tired, they were, in shock. her husband was taken to the front lines, and she was crying. She said, he doesn't even have like protective armor. I mean, he's just,
He didn't have a helmet. He was in the front line without no helmet.
no helmet, no vest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty hard. Those first few months, it was just very terrible when the war started. So, anyways, this family was just so freaking out.
Yeah,
remember?
let me jump in. So what happens is we were paying these buses, so we would go to the border, load them up, and then bring them in the capital city. And then after some time, I think about a few weeks, we were told that the capital city is closed. They cannot take in any more refugees because they were not able to host, accommodate. Everything was filled up, so they were trying to send them anywhere else. So we were told, once we got to the border, we were told that whoever gets on that bus cannot stay in Chisinau, so they need to go anywhere else. So I was not with that bus at that time. I sent a volunteer, so this volunteer calls me, and she was very emotional, a young girl. She's about 21 years old. She calls and said, John, we filled up the bus, but this worker here has this young lady with 2 young kids and her grandmother, and they're all crying. They don't know what to do. They're really scared, and there are predators at the border of Moldova. There are people, human trafficking is everywhere, especially in Moldova. During those times, people are trying to take advantage of them. And she said, they don't want to leave Moldova. They don't want to go across the border. They don't know anybody in Moldova. They don't know where to go. But the social worker is begging me to take them because they have a 7 months old baby, and she's been in the same diaper for almost 3 days. And I'm on the phone, and I'm just telling her, just go ahead and bring her. And she's like, well, I bring her, but what are we going to do? I said, just bring her to Chisinau. So they took her on the bus, and every bus was coming to a cafeteria that we paid, and we would have everybody have a hot meal, and then from that point, we'll put them back on the bus and send them to the other side of the Moldova border so they would cross into Europe. And that's where we would meet at the bus with Adriana. So she was doing something else, and when we met, the bus was right there, and I was hoping I can talk to Adriana to tell her that is this family, and I was almost promised that I was gonna have to take them at our house.
Yeah. So we ended up with this beautiful family at our home, and we hosted them for over a week, during which time we were trying to just accommodate them. And so for me, this time became a very, very emotional time. I was born in Romania, and my family immigrated to the United States when I was just 11 years old. And I was reminded during this time when my family immigrated here, and we stayed at a family's home here in America who hosted us, who cooked hot meals for us, who took care of us, who took us shopping, who took us to, I think it was a church who also offered English as a second language, learning English just like Curtis Lake is doing. Thank you for doing that, by the way. And so we did that. So my mom, my dad, and me and my sister, we would go and learn English. And so this family was there for us to host us and help us to transition into the American culture. And so as I'm sitting there for this whole week and just tending to this family, cooking 3 meals a day, making sure they have, all the towels and everything, bedding, and taking care of the kids. And then John's running around to try to figure out, future-wise, like where are they going to stay? Can we find them an apartment for rent, schooling for this boy, like all of these little things, and I'm there in the kitchen, and I'm washing the dishes, and I'm reminded of all this, and it's almost like God was said, Adriana, this is your time. This is your time to pay back for what this family did for you in the United States when your family immigrated. Now it's your turn to care for this family. And I'm just there and just crying and bawling and washing the dishes, and like with such gratefulness, serving this family that stayed in our home for a week and served them so well. And then so even now we keep in touch with this family, and thank you so much, because it is because of your generosity, let me tell you, that we were able to do all of these things during such a difficult time, not only because war and refugees in Ukraine, but also for us and our family. At some point, we were fearing for our lives. We were wondering whether we could continue to stay on the mission field, or whether we would have to come back in the United States, But your encouragements and your prayers and the fact that you were there for us, it meant so much for us. This is what keeps people on the mission field. And so I want to thank you, not just for us, but on behalf of all the missionaries, all your partners around the world, for, writing to them, praying for them, supporting them. You are doing an amazing job, and we can never, ever thank you enough for what you do here and across the world. Thank you so much. I will allow John now to go on and continue with the message that he has. I'm so excited for what God has put on his heart to share with you, and I hope that you will also enjoy the rest of the message. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie. When the war started, we were right at the beginning of our semester with the ministry, with the students. And we didn't want to put that on hold. We didn't want to stop what we were doing. But the plate that we were having just got filled up with even more stuff. And I'm so grateful that we were able to do, and I want to add to what Adriana was saying, because we didn't have enough funds to do that extra work and extra relief and everything, but you and people here responded right away because you care and because you're part of it. So my message this morning for you, and whatever a few minutes that I have left, is called Meeting the Needs from Local to Global. Meeting the needs from local to global. And I feel like it really ties in with the message, or with the theme that you guys have had for this missions week. But I want to take you, and I'm going to introduce this text that I'm going to read, and I'm going to read from Luke. And I have a picture here. When I was thinking about Luke, I thought some of you are going to think that I'm talking about Star Wars. And it's not about Star Wars, by the way, and I know you know that, but I thought I'd just bring a little relief after all that said stories, and to just bring this joke. But I'm going to get back serious. And I want to introduce this text because I'm going to go through a lot of reading, and I'm going to jump over a lot, but I want you to catch the thought that I want to convey to you, because I feel like Luke, this writer from the Bible, was writing to one person, and I'm going to read to you, you're going to be able to see, but I feel like he was writing a newsletter. I know we talk about partners, we talk about people across the world, people that you support, and then you want to hear what is going on in Moldova, for example, or what is going on in other places that you send your support, and then the way we communicate today is so different than what people used to communicate back then. I'm trying to catch up with all the communication stuff we have today with TikTok, Instagram, and some of you might probably have Facebook, and some of you might have it all, and some of you might not even know what I'm talking about. But back then, it was through letters. I think very few people today write letters. Real letters on the paper. But this man that I'm gonna start reading, so if you would follow with me, I'm gonna jump through a lot, but I got all the verses up there, and I'm gonna read from this Bible version that I like. You might not be used to it. It's from NLT. But it says, many people have set out to write accounts about events that have been fulfilled among us. They use the eyewitness reports circulating among us from the early disciples. And I love the explanation that it's in parentheses there. It says that he calls disciples the servants of the word. So verse 3, having carefully investigated everything from the beginning. So what I love about Luke, he doesn't just write a letter. He doesn't just say, this is what I feel like God says, where he does not say, here's my thoughts. He said, after carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I also have decided to write an accurate account for you, most honorable Theophilus, so that you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. And then I'm going to jump in chapter 10. So follow with me. I'm going to jump in chapter 10 because I want you to see how Luke keeps bringing these accounts, and he includes in his gospel a lot of things that are included in Matthew and in John and Mark, but Luke carefully investigated everything. So I feel like he is a journalist. He investigated everything from eyewitnesses. So he wanted these men that would be reading this letter to be able to go back and verify it. So all of these accounts are verifiable, but he includes a few details that I would like for you to kind of see and I would like to point out to you. And then starting in chapter 10, and I'm just going to touch on verse 1, which said, Lord now chose 72 other disciples and sent them out. And verse 2, these were his instructions to these disciples that he sends. He said, the harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. I love the way Luke writes this verse. This verse is mentioned in other gospels, but I love the way Luke mentions it. He says, the Lord is in charge of his harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his field. Now go. Now he's saying, those of you that are involved, that are in the harvest, those of you that are being sent, those of you supposed to pray. We have many people that pray for different needs. We have people pray for needs that they have no idea what they're praying for. But Luke says that not anybody can pray for workers, because they don't know how it is to be in the middle of work and your plate is filled up. And you look around and you realize that it's too much. So in the next slide, I would like to point out just a couple of things. I would like for you to see that in this verse, Luke wants Theophilus to know that it is so much work and the need is endless. And he wants to point out that anybody that's involved in that work will not be able to accomplish that job alone. Not alone. So, whatever your partners are across the world, I want you to know that they cannot do the job without you. We're called to be partners. We're called to work together. And Luke is trying to say that as a worker, you will depend on the Lord first, but then you will have to depend on your team. You will have to depend on the people around you. And it's so interesting how he ends this, because he says, and go, now go, and remember that I am sending you out as lambs among wolves. So, by the way, you will be hunted. And I want to jump to his second part, to his second letter, because he feels like he needs to write another letter to the same person. And I'm going to start Acts. Some of you might know that it's still written by Luke, but I'm going to show it to you. In verse 1, it says, in my first book, he is referencing to the Gospel of Luke, I told you, Theophilus, about everything Jesus began to do and teach, until the day he was taken up to heaven after giving his chosen apostles further instructions through the Holy Spirit. So I'm going to jump again here. I'm going to jump in verse 6. So here Luke is trying to explain to Theophilus that these disciples that were sent, they had to receive power, and after they were empowered, and they had this conversation with Jesus actually before they were empowered. So I want you to notice this conversation that Jesus is having with them, and he is trying to pick up the temperature in the stove almost, like he's trying to build up urgency and the disciples are not getting it. So in verse 6, it says, "So when the apostles were with Jesus, they kept asking him, 'Lord, has the time come for you to free Israel and restore our kingdom?'" So now they're kind of asking their own question. You can see it here, and he responds, "The Father alone has the authority to set those dates and times, and they are not for you to know." So by the way, it's none of your business. Here's what you need to know. "But you will receive the power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses." So you're worried about the kingdom? Well, here's what you need to do if you're worried about my kingdom. You have to be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere. And then he goes, starting from across the street in Jerusalem, through Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the world, the ends of the earth. So I want to jump. I want you to see. I have a point, by the way. Just bear with me. I'm going to jump to chapter 2, verse 14. "Then Peter, after they received the Holy Spirit, people around realize there's something going on in that house over there. Peter wants to bring an explanation, so he stepped up towards with the 11 other apostles and shouted to the crowd, 'Listen carefully, all of you fellow Jews and residents of Jerusalem.'" And he goes into the preaching mode. So he preaches them, verse 40, and he says, "Then Peter continued preaching for a long time, strongly urging all his listeners, 'Save yourselves from this crooked generation.' And here's where I'm getting close to my point. Those who believed what Peter said were baptized and added to the church that day, about 3,000 in all." Verse 42. "All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings and fellowship, and to sharing in meals." And in parentheses, they include the Lord's Supper. That means that the meals were not the Lord's Supper or something else, but then also they were also doing the Lord's Supper together, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miracle signs and wonders, and all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. Now, this is where the urgency and the awe gets all together. They sold their properties and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and sharing their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added. Now, after all these people, what they've done, then Luke is trying to bring it to a closure to that verse that I shared with you about the harvest, because all these people, they were urged by Peter to respond, and they responded to the gospel. They accepted this message. And once they accepted this message, they got the urgency. They understood that this is so important, that nobody was asking them to give, nobody was asking them to sell anything, nobody was asking them to fulfill any needs. But they looked around and they saw them, because they were disciples. And what I love is that because the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved, is the numbers in the church kept on growing. So I just want to point out that God, the Lord of the harvest, added the numbers, not the disciples, not the apostles, not the miracles, not the giving. None of that really brought or grew the church. We expect a lot of times to put money, and we feel like the church needs our money. We feel like the church is asking for money, and some people might feel like that. Not you, I know, not you. But when we talk about missions, we talk about contributing or meeting the needs across the street and meeting the needs around the world. We're meeting the needs locally and going globally. That means that we have to look around and see needs, because there are many needs. And that's the first thing that Jesus wanted his disciples to know, that it has to be met. That's the kingdom. Peter preached, but I feel like his preaching was long. I hope mine is not going to be long. But I feel like preaching sometimes is long, but our generosity comes short. But I want you to understand that Luke, in this second letter, in the Acts of Apostles, where he later comes and shares all these miracles and the way the church grew, he begins this second letter in chapter 2 showing this urge, this awe that got the church, where people began to see needs and they started to contribute. They started to participate. And that's why the church grew. We do see Paul walking around preaching, and we see people responding to the gospel. But if you are careful later on, Luke keeps on mentioning some names that Paul writes to, and he says, thank you to the church in Thessalonica, or thank you to the church in other places that sends me help fulfill this generosity. When we talk about generosity, I want to explain to you, I know I'm supposed to close, but I was told I can go as much as I want. So I know who locks the church here in this church, because we came in early yesterday and the church was locked, and Terry had to call somebody. So when you guys all leave, I hope that person is not going to come to me and say, John, here's the key, you lock the church when you're done preaching. So I'm not going to go that long, but I would like for you to just stay with me for a couple of more minutes. I want to share with you a few things that we do, our approach to missions in Moldova. Because we've been in Moldova for about 18 years. We preached a lot. People are sick and tired of preaching, and they're trying to look at us and at churches, and almost every lost person in Moldova thinks that the church are hypocrites. And I feel they do that because they want to see something else. They want to see something that James later comes, and I'm going to read that verse to you. I think I'm jumping ahead of myself, but I want you to understand why I included these pictures. Because in these pictures, we meet the needs of young adults, of university students in Moldova. That's probably one of the most ignored groups by churches in Moldova. Almost every church that we walk in Moldova are elderly, and everybody has to get saved. And we love young and old. We love older people. But I feel like the younger generation is going to be the generation that's going to take this church to the next level. It's going to take it to the next generation. So we need to empower them. We need to help them understand. We need them to understand the urgency of the gospel. And these people do not understand it, because most of the people that come into our center, we're renting this space in the capital city, where in the center of the city, where all the universities are, and we have a big name on the building, which it's called a Student Resource Center, and there's nothing like that in Moldova. Universities in Moldova do not have any student groups or anything like that, study groups even, or anything like that like we do in the United States. There's no support from the universities to the students. So we take advantage of that, and we put our name up there, and we call anybody that's young man or woman, or especially students. We don't throw anybody out, and they walk in, and the first thing they meet is hospitality. It's very different than what it is in any other place in Moldova, because we share with them a hot meal. They look at us and they go, all this is free? And they don't understand, this is not about money. Because if we share with them our resources, the next thing I know, they come to me and they go, John, I realized you don't cuss. And
I'm thinking, why do I need to cuss? But he goes, well, everybody else does, but you're so different. What is so different about you? And I go, well, let me tell you what's so different about me. But these people, most of them are atheists. They don't believe God even exists. 70% of young adults that come to our center are atheists. They don't want to hear anything about God. If they would know that our center is associated with any church, they would not come in. But because they connect with me, because I get their respect, now they want to listen what I have to say. And I ask them about the Bible. They go, I don't believe in the Bible. So I say, well, would you mind to meet with me to read the Bible? And they go, John, I respect you. I don't really like reading the Bible, but if you really insist. So I say, look, why don't you meet with me? I'm going to read something from the Bible. I'm just going to tell you something really interesting on that meeting from the Bible. And they're willing to do that. And once I do that once or twice, then I invite them. I say to them, hey, I meet with a group of students. We have this meeting once a week, and I would like for you to join us, where we actually studied the Bible together. Actually, I've not had any person deny or say no to that invitation. You know why? Because they realized that we care. They saw genuinity. They really saw that we care for their needs, and they're willing to respond. Now, we have different discipleship groups, but I want you to understand that we actually have attraction groups where people just come in, they get to know us, and then once we connect with them, then we invite them to discipleship groups. I want to put a name to my stories. I want to put a face to my story. So would you go to the next? I have a couple of people here. I don't have time to talk about both of them. I'm just going to talk about Daniela. Daniela is a young lady. She was a student. She just graduated university, but she came to us about almost 2 years ago. She walked into the center, and we have a picture of Daniela, if you would go to the last one. Daniela walked in, and she was so curious to why do we provide all this stuff for free? So then she approached Adriana, and she connected with Adriana. Adriana invited her to her small group, and then she got into the small group. She started having a lot of questions, but then after a group, she came to Adriana, and she said, I don't believe in God, and I don't want to believe in God because I'm abandoned. She lives with her mother alone. They were abandoned by her father. She doesn't even know her father. They live in poverty. She was able to go to university, which it was hard, but she made it. And she said, everything I have, I made it on my own efforts. And I have so much anger, so much bitterness, and I hate everything around me. And Adriana says, I can help you. And she goes, no, how can you help me? I hate everything. And she goes, I know someone that can help you. So Adriana shared Jesus, and she said, I don't want you to just take it for granted. Why don't we pray together? And let's ask Jesus to take everything that you carry, all this baggage, just give it to him, and let's see how you feel afterwards. She comes back next day, jumping around, so happy. She was one of the biggest promoters in her small group. So I had the privilege, about a week ago, to baptize her in water. All of this, everything that we shared, it's not because of John and Adriana. I want you to understand that Luke is writing this letter to Theophilus that was probably far away. He didn't know what was going on. Luke was involved in ministry. But I would like to believe, this is my speculation, okay? I would like to believe that Theophilus was very, very involved. And I'm looking at you, and I would like to thank you as you are the senders. You are the people that are receiving all these newsletters from Luke's, like John and Adriana and some other people, and the people that we saw, the lady in the video, and so many other people that you're supporting, but you're like Theophilus somewhere else, and you're sending people. And I want to finish with this writing that Matthew is a little bit more straight in his audience's face, and he says this to you. Matthew 25 from 34. He says, then the king will say to those on his right. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then those righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and fed you? And I'm going to jump just in closing. And the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of these least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Church, and I don't know each one of your names, but if I can put your name next to Luke's letter that he was writing to Phyllis, and to add my gratitude, and I would like to tell you, you are every day involved with us in Moldova. And all of those people, all those pictures are there because you participate in the ministry that we're doing, and we won't be able to do it without you. And I would like to pray with you. I would like to close in prayer. And I would like to pray over those of you that have not been part of missions. You have probably not giving because you probably don't have enough. You probably haven't been giving because you don't know what it means, where it goes, and what do people do with that money. I want you to know it's not about money. Nobody's asking you to sell your home. Please don't. But I feel like today a lot of people can spare a coffee or spare an extra drink or donate a meal. And you can participate. If you haven't done it, I would like to pray for you. I would like for you to consider it, try it, and be part of all of those that are involved. And I feel like most of you probably are giving. And I'm going to include you in my prayer because I feel like you have been part of giving. And I would like for the King one day to tell you those words.